Hello everyone. I am thrilled to present to you about the classical novel written by George Orwell, Animal Farm. I am Arkachur and I will try to shed some light on the tendency of segregation in a dynamical society, taking it from the novel. My primary aim will be to keep in front of you the societal stratification of the ruler and the ruled upon. Before knowing about the novel, we should first look at the characters that give the dynamic nature to the plot. We can see a plethora of characters throughout the whole story, which stands for various allegories. The novel was originally written to criticize the barbaric rule of Joseph Stalin, the then dictator of the Soviet Union, and thus the characters are framed in a way to reflect that. First, we have the pigs, who stand for the intelligence in a society. They are more inclined towards leadership, and Napoleon the Boar, who is one of them, is an allegory for Joseph Stalin. Second, we have a cynical old donkey called Benjamin. He is the only character who possesses the ability of critical thinking. Next, there are the general population, like horses and sheep, cocks and hens and others. They are devoid of education and are easily manipulated. Next, there are the dogs of Napoleon. The nine dogs of Napoleon are his enforcers. Their job is to crush any dissidents against Napoleon. Finally, the farmers comes. They are the torchbearer of foreign aggression. The character qualities and their action governs the dynamics of the story. The story opens with a bunch of farm animals under the oppressive iron rule of the farmer named Mr. Jones. But he is soon removed from the farm by revolting animals under the leadership of Snowball and Napoleon. This establishes a socialist society which the name Animal Farm. The animals have sought to uphold the code of animalism, which can be summarized by the seven commandments made by the old boar, who is the forerunner of this idea of revolution. However, Napoleon snatches power soon, banishing Snowball from Animal Farm, and then starts to deform and bend the ideals of animalism. Soon, the idealistic Animal Farms becomes a thriving dystopia, and there is inherent inherent dynamics of segregation. The animalism code starts to break down from seven to initially five, and then to only one. That all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. This thus states the final laissez-faire of the animal farm. Misinformation flows through the farm, and any sign of dissent is dealt with heavy retaliation. The pig starts to behave like and deal with human beings, which was once forbidden by the very codes of animalism. And they ultimately become the very oppressors that they once overthrew. This literary work is packed with the idea of classification of society on the basis of dominance. The very nature of this feudal society indicates the prevalence of discrimination, looting, and violation of fundamental rights of the populace. But the question comes, how did it happen in the first place? Why did the commoners allow the oppressor to hold the whip over them? How is the dictator still maintaining the population's trust on him? To summarize all the questions in a nutshell, what builds an inherent tendency of societal division in any thriving population? I'll try to find answers to these questions from here on. First, there comes the technique of fear propagation. It is a very classical technique used everywhere you can lay your eyes on. In the story, when Napoleon starts his campaign of power consolidation, he begins a defamation campaign against Snowball with the help of Squealer, a master manipulator. Snowball actually is the real hero of the revolution and believes in a collaborative approach to leadership. However, constant bludgeoning of the Squealer's propaganda fills the farm with the fake news that Snowball is an enemy of revolution. This becomes the perfect excuse for Napoleon to drive away Snowball and thus consolidating power for himself. This action thus segregates the general population from the pigs who starts ruling over them. This example is seen in various social dynamics, like for example, the rise of Nazism in Germany. The German Jews were targeted by Hitler's party and were falsely accused of colluding with foreign powers in World War One, which made Germany lose the war. But it is actually totally fake information. In reality, many Jews fought for Germany gallantly in the Great War. Moreover, they were also accused of making financial frauds in the late 1920s and the early 1930s Germany, in which the major chunk of population was unemployed. Thus, the Jews became the source of artificial fear, which the Nazis prayed to gain the support of an already anti-Semitic population. These fear tactics ultimately convinced the people to look for a strong leader, and it facilitated the growth of a divisive society. Next, classic technique comes of controlling the flow of education. Napoleon maintained a strict restriction over the dissemination of knowledge in society. First, he takes control over the education system and allows mainly the pigs to have a proper education. This gives the pigs a significant intellectual edge over the others. Secondly, Napoleon reduces the education of other animals to the very basic level, teaching them only what they need to know to perform their daily chores. This limited education prevents the other animals to question or challenge Napoleon's decrees. As an example, in our own country, we still observe a residue of an event gave to us by the colonial British rule. The British severely restricted the education to a minor part of the Indian population, like the upper caste Brahmins, the Parsi communities, and others, so on. The introduction of Western education via the controversial Macklemore Minute of 1835 is an example of this. Even though till now, still date, the present Indian education system still follows parts of the Minute of Macklemore. This all causes segregation between the privileged minority who received education and the rest of the society. In time, the educated people who were mainly from our caste created a dominance on the others. Next, there is a technique called the control over resource. It can be seen in the novel as the pigs are seen to have hoarding resources such as food, materials, and distributing them selectively to maintain a position of power over the population. There is an instant where the gullible ships notice the pigs eating in excess while the rest of the animals are in starvation, have acute food shortage. When the ships asked the reason for this inequality, the pigs answered that they, being the most intelligent ones, need more food to function properly and protect the farm from humans. Napoleon used the very technique to control over people's mind and manipulate other opinion. He convinces the animals that he is the only one capable of providing for them and protecting them from any harm. Furthermore, Napoleon uses his control of resources to undermine the potential opposition by creating a dependency among the animals. By making the animals reliant on him for their basic needs, he makes it more difficult for them to challenge his authority without risking their own survival. In real life, we can see this example such as in the apartheid region of South Africa. During that regime, the white minority government controlled the country's resources, including land, water, and minerals. They used this to control and enforce racial segregation and discrimination against the black South Africans, who were denied access to many resources and opportunities available to the whites exclusive. This created a system of economic and social inequality that reinforced the government's power and made it difficult for black South Africans to challenge their oppression. Another example is of Nicolas Maduro's dictatorship in Venezuela. In the country, the government controls the oil industry, which is the major source of revenue for the country. Maduro has used his control to maintain his power by providing jobs and resources to loyal supporters and punishing opposition groups by cutting off their access to funding and resources. The next technique comes in the form of propaganda. Napoleon and Schuyler rewrite history to suit their own narrative and justify their actions. For example, they change the original commandments to give themselves more power and claim that all of Trump's successes are due to Napoleon's leadership. But in reality, Napoleon is shown to have stolen much like a snowball's ideas, like that of the windmill formation. Napoleon and Schuyler spread misinformation to control the animals' beliefs and opinions. They use slogans and repeated messages to reinforce their propaganda and convince the animals that they are better off under Napoleon's rule. Examples in real world can be seen in our very own country politics, our country politics. Religion and caste has often been used in India to create a division among the Indian population. Numerous times, the IT cells of various political parties spread propaganda and misinformation against some parts of the society for them to gain followers in the majority of the society. But this also creates a side effect. That is the division in the society which is living in a state of harmony. Many political parties also use appeasement policy as a tool to gain their support among the section and promote their agendas. However, this often triggers tension and conflict among different caste groups. These demonization politics have significant impact towards the division of today's Indian society. Apart from this, there are various other dynamical situations that facilitates the growth of segregation. The torch bearer being the blind faith of the population. The sheep are shown as animals who blindly believe Squealer's words. During the course of story, Squealer changed all of the commandments one by one. But the sheep noticed this thing. They then confront Squealer, ask why are you doing this? So this was not the actual ideal that formed the animalism. But he simply gaslights them by telling that it was always written like this. Deciding to abandon their own senses, the sheep goes on to believe Squealer's words, saying that why would Squealer lie? He has no reasons to do so, so we must believe his. We must be mistaken. This blind faith thus acts as a dangerous fallacy of the psychology of human beings, which gets them manipulated. Next comes critical thinking. Except for all except for the cynical old donkey named Benjamin, none of the characters in the animal farm showed any signs of critical thinking. Only Benjamin was able to apprehend the hideous nature of the events that plagued the animal farm. Absence of an attitude of critical thinking and a mentality of questioning, especially to those in power, yields in a dystopia, and it is no good comes out of it dystopia. These are some of the reasons that drive the society towards stratification. However, the list is far from being complete, as the concept intertwines many complex societal dynamics. However, for the sake of conciseness, the list had to be translated at some point, and I chose this one. I have been able to convey at least some of the concepts encapsulated in this video, waiting eagerly for your feedback. Thank you.